I offered about 50,000 over asking for my first real estate deal in New York City, and it's still appraised for 80,000 over my offer. Now, how did I know it was the right deal, and why was I so sure it was a great move? That's exactly what we're going to walk through today, so you can learn from both my wins and my mistakes. In this video, I'm breaking down the 5 biggest lessons I learned closing on my first real estate deal in New York City, plus a bonus tip on how the whole process forced me to rethink my credit card strategy. And at some point later on, I'll show you the exact moment I decided, yeah, I'm sending this 50,000 over the list, and how I stayed calm, waiting for that appraisal number to come back. Now, if you're thinking about buying your first place in the next couple of years, maybe that's a house hack, a small multifamily, or just a starter home, and you're also juggling credit cards, your credit score, and your finances, then this video is for you. You're gonna see a real play-by-play of what actually happened when I closed on my first property, what I got right, what almost went wrong, and how I protected my long-term credit card strategy. And by the end, you'll know the 5 lessons I wish someone sat down and explained to me up front. You'll know what to do, what not to do, and everything in between when it comes to getting ready to buy your first place. Now, quick context so you know where I'm coming from. I'm a first-time home buyer and investor, and I just closed on a duplex in New York City that I plan to house hack. I'm renovating one unit to rent out and living in the other. And I searched for a little over a year before this deal finally happened. Now on this channel, there's really 2 stories running at the same time. There's the real estate story, finding the right deal, running the numbers, and not overpaying, and the credit story, how to not tank your credit profile or mortgage approval odds while you're doing it. Now, most content either says, just buy anything, real estate only goes up, or it's super vague and never talks about how your credit cards and credit profile can actually affect your mortgage. My goal with this video is simple, give you a clear framework from my own experience so you can make the best decision and get the best deal for you. Now, if you enjoy this kind of breakdown, like and subscribe and send this to a friend. It really helps push the content out. It helps out the channel, so thank you in advance. All right, let's start at the beginning because lesson 1 starts way before the appraisal and before the offer. Lesson 1 isn't about knowing the deal, it's about knowing your deal. And if it doesn't fit, you need to walk away. Now, when I say your deal, I mean your buying criteria. Most buyers fall into 2 camps. They scroll on Zillow, saving random listings because the kitchen looks nice, or they know exactly what they're hunting for. Price range, bedroom count, neighborhood type, rental potential. That second group isn't just shopping for a house, they're shopping for a specific deal that fits their numbers and their lifestyle. Now, if you don't define that up front, you fall in love with properties you never actually penciled out. You end up wasting time touring stuff you should have filtered out from the couch. Worst case, you stretch your budget for something that looks great on Instagram, but feels terrible in your bank account 6 months later. When you get this right, your search becomes systematic. This fits my criteria, cool, let's dig into it. Now, the big shift for me was when I finally sat down and asked myself, okay, what am I actually trying to buy? For me, I realized I wanted a duplex, not a single family, something that I could house hack. I wanted to be in New York City in an area close to family and work. And I was okay with being slightly cash flow negative at first because my priority was appreciation, not maximizing cash flow from day one. Now, house hacking is simple. Live in part of the property, rent the rest out, and use that income to offset or reduce whatever your mortgage payment is. Now, here's the framework I use, so feel free to steal it if it helps you out. You want to break things down into 3 buckets. Bucket 1 is all about location type. Are you looking for a city or a specific neighborhood? What's the commute looking like? Is there public transit available? Do you have parking options? Now, bucket 2 is all about property type. You have your single family or your duplexes or triplexes. You have condos, turnkeys, which are properties that you can go in and live in right away, versus rehab properties. These are all things you have to flesh out. Lastly, you have your financial boundaries. You want to take a look at your rough max purchase price. Figure out your targeted monthly payment, your estimated down payment, and also your closing costs. And for rentals, you want to take a look at things like your cash flow, cash on cash return, and cap rate. Defining your deal lets you walk away before you get emotionally attached to the wrong house. And it's that exact clarity that helped me later when I decided, am I really about to offer 50,000 over asking for this place? But we'll get into that in lesson 4. Now, even once I knew my deal on paper, there was still a big problem. The area I was looking for was basically a quarter of New York City, way too broad. Now that leads into lesson 2. And that lesson is to start wide, but then drill into your neighborhood. Now, most people either lock in on one super specific neighborhood and never find anything, or they look everywhere and never build real conviction. I did both. At first, my criteria was basically New York City area, seems nice, under my price. That's not a strategy. Really, that's just vibes. Here's what actually worked. I started wide, so you see the whole menu. Then I zoomed into a couple neighborhoods that made sense. That's how you become a specialist in certain markets. Think of it like this. Which towns or boroughs fit your budget and lifestyle? That's the macro. Then the micro. inside those, which specific streets actually feel good. I looked at multiple boroughs and price points, but the real learning wasn't on Zillow, it was walking the neighborhoods. Now for me, I'd walk blocks during the day and at night. I'd listen for noise, check foot traffic, and see who's actually outside. Now it goes without saying, some red flags are boarded up buildings, constant sirens, and streets that feel sketchy, whereas some green flags are busy but safe, good lighting, and family being out, or nice businesses. Now, two areas can have similar price points and similar rent, but feel completely different. And in the end, you have to feel safe and comfortable living there. Quick example, let's say neighborhood A has slightly cheaper, slightly better cash flow on paper, but low appreciation and more tenant risk, where neighborhood B has slightly higher price or similar and slightly lower cash flow, but better long-term upside. Now for my duplex, I chose neighborhood B. Even if cash flow started a bit weaker, I think appreciation and rent growth long-term could make this a solid investment over the next 5-10 years plus. In the end, there's no perfect neighborhood. You're always going to trade something, but your criteria tells you what matters most. Now, after I locked in on the neighborhood, I needed a system so that when the listing popped up, I could quickly decide if it was even worth touring. That's exactly where lesson 3 comes in, and that's to analyze, analyze, analyze. Reps equal conviction. This next part is why I could make an offer on the duplex literally the same day it hit the market. And it's because I basically knew the numbers and offer range before I even left the open house. Now to find strong properties, you need to be able to analyze and decide fast. At the end, it's a reps game. Over about 12 months between me and my brother, who is my business partner in the deal, we analyzed over 100 deals. Some were quick no's, some were maybes, and a few were screaming buys that got scooped up immediately. Now, specializing in one market helps you see patterns here. Unit size, layouts, features, rent relative to the price of the property. You start to spot deals in minutes instead of days. Now, at first, I used the Bigger Pockets deal analyzer, and I can't recommend it enough. It makes things super simple, and it's also a great resource if you're new to real estate and just looking to get started. It is a little pricey though, so if you want to go a cheaper route, you can build out a simple model in Excel or Google Sheets. Now for this model, all you're really asking is how is this property going to affect my finances, and at the end of the day, what's the trade-off and is it worth it? Now your core variables here are your purchase price, your down payment, your interest rate, your taxes and insurance, rough estimates of repairs and capex, estimates of the rent per unit, and a few other variables like your budgeted management fees and your budgeted vacancy fees. Now with these variables, you should be able to figure out your cash on cash return and cap rate to determine, is this even a good deal and should I explore it further? Now this is exactly where my credit card brain came in handy. I'm used to thinking in trade-offs and long-term upside. Looking at a deal sort of felt like looking at a new card. Normally I would ask myself, does it fit my long-term strategy? It's the same rules here. Not every deal is for you, just like not every card is for you. But your system should filter out most of the noise so you can focus on the few that might actually work. Now those reps are exactly why when this duplex hit the market for me, at the original asking price, I saw the upside and was willing to go over asking. And that's exactly what lesson 4 is. Have conviction in your numbers, even over asking. Now here's the part that makes some people uncomfortable, but it's where the math matters most. Most buyers treat the list price like it's sacred. If something lists for, let's say, $700,000, they can't imagine offering $720, $740, $750. If you don't trust your own numbers, you'll walk away from great deals because you're anchored to a listing price. Or you'll overpay for weak deals just because the list price seems low. Now for my duplex, when it hit the market, because of the reps I did and how well I knew the neighborhood, I immediately knew it felt undervalued. So I did what I always do and ran it through my analyzer. I checked comps, I looked at current and realistic future rents, and the numbers kept saying, this is worth more than it's listed for. So I asked myself, what's my max walkaway number? And if it appraises around what I think, will I feel good about this 6 months from now? That's how I ended up offering about $50,000 over asking. Now to give you an example of what this actually means, let's say a property lists for $600,000, but you offer $650,000 and it appraises for $730,000. So on paper, you overpaid by $50,000 versus the listing, but you underpaid by about $80,000 versus what the bank says it's worth. This is what matters more long term. The appraisal cushion can give you some added benefits. It gives you some built-in equity if the market softens, and also gives you the confidence that you didn't buy at a totally delusional number. Now, where does the credit strategy show up here? This is where not playing games with your credit really matters. Now, in my case, if I had been opening cards left and right or showing unstable balances, this deal could have easily fallen apart even though the math worked. Now, to even get here, to offer over asking and to wait on the appraisal without losing my mind, I had to go through a long waiting game. And that's what lesson 5 is: to be patient even when it feels like nothing is happening. Now, we all love the idea of, I'll start looking and get a deal in 3 months, but in a competitive market, that's usually not a reality. For me, it took about 18 months from the I'm serious about buying phase to the actually holding the keys and finish closing phase. And in that time, deals I loved went to other buyers, properties that looked great online fell apart, and there were days where I thought, am I being too picky? Should I just buy something that kind of works? But here's the trade-off. A strict criteria plus a tight budget equals a slower process. Looser criterias equal a faster purchase, but maybe a worse long-term fit. Now for me, I chose the approach where I was okay taking a little longer if it meant actually buying what fit the numbers and my lifestyle. But while I waited, I saved more aggressively. I tightened my credit with no new applications and a lower utilization. And I kept learning about neighborhoods and refining my analysis. If you rush into a deal you're not ready for, you're more than likely going to get stretched every single month. You'll be more tempted to lean on credit cards just to breathe, and your whole financial life will get more fragile. But if you can take a bit longer to build cash, protect your credit score, and land a property that actually fits, you'll set yourself up to use credit cards as a tool, not as a lifeline. So when it feels like nothing is happening, ask, am I stuck because the market is impossible, or is it because I'm holding on to criteria that actually matters for me and my long-term plan? Now, during that whole time, I also had to keep my credit profile clean so the mortgage approval stayed smooth. That leads into the bonus lesson: how this journey forced me to rethink my credit card strategy. Now let's talk about what no one actually covers, and it's what credit cards actually do to the mortgage process for you. Now, if you're into points and miles, you've probably had this moment. You see a crazy welcome offer, you're a few months away from buying, and you think, one more card won't hurt. But the reality is, right before and during the mortgage process, everything is under a microscope. If you get this wrong, you can ding your credit score right before a pull. Also, you could hurt your debt to income ratio or just freak out your lender. Now, here are a few rules that I followed. Now, the first rule is to pause any new cards for at least 3 to 6 months before the pre-approval. No more, but this sign-up offer is just too good. You want a consistent, boring credit report. The second rule is to keep your utilization tight. During the underwriting process, I aim to keep my utilization under about 7%. Really, I was trying to keep it at close to 0. This meant paying off cards in full every single month and closely monitoring any major purchases. And the last rule is no new big finances. No new car loans, furniture financing, or big monthly payments. You can use your cards and pay them off, but in this phase, boring and predictable is your friend. Now, after closing, that's when the strategy flips. Once I had the keys, I started asking, what cards make sense now that I've got the rental property and the real estate expenses? And how can I use welcome offers and multipliers for things like renovations and furniture purchases to really maximize any of my spend for the next couple months? So instead of chasing bonuses before the mortgage and hoping for the best, I protected my profile up to closing, then lined up post-closing to spend with the new cards. Because at the end of the day, saving even 0.25% on your mortgage rate over 30 years is usually way more worth it than one-time $500 bonus you can grab from a certain credit card. So the bonus lesson is to treat the months before your mortgage like a no new credit card zone. And then once you close, resume your credit card strategy, but do it intentionally around your new expenses. For me, the 2 cards at the top of the list post-closing were the Chase Ink cards and also the Mesa Homeowner card. And if you want a deeper dive in either of those cards and how I'm stacking them with renovation spend, you can check out those videos on my channel. Now, a quick final recap. Know your deal or walk away. Get clear on location, property type, and financial boundaries. Next, start wide, then get hyper local. Third is to get your deal reps in. Analyze enough properties that you stop guessing and start recognizing patterns. Fourth, it's to trust your numbers and not the list price. The list price is a suggestion. Your analysis and the appraisal are what actually matter. And lastly, it's to be patient. 12, 18, 24 months doesn't mean you're failing. It means you might be filtering out correctly. And last, the bonus is to pause any new applications and keep your utilization low to make sure you're refining your credit card profile and your credit card strategy for the long term, not just for the next few months. Now, my situation might not be yours, and I can't guarantee you'll find a deal like mine, but if you understand these lessons and actually use them, you'll put yourself in a much better position to recognize a good deal, walk away from bad ones, and not blow up your credit in the process. Now, for me, this duplex isn't the end goal. In fact, it's just the start. It's one piece of the bigger plan built on real estate, house hacking, side hustles and businesses, and also credit card strategies and optimizing spend. Now, you don't have to buy in New York City like me, but you do need a plan, a system, and the patience to wait for a deal that fits your life and your numbers. And as Confucius said, success depends upon previous preparation, and without such preparation, there is sure to be failure. Now, if this walkthrough helped you out at all, maybe it calmed you down, gave you structure, or made you rethink how you're using cards around a future mortgage, do me a favor. Leave a like so I know that you want more content like this. It genuinely helps push the video out to more people who need it. And if you want more videos like this every single week, breaking down credit cards, travel hacking, real estate, business, and more, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.